In this presentation, I will outline the steps taken from the initial pilot phase in the late 1990s to the present-day use of the European language portfolio. I will mainly focus on the development in Hamburg, my home city in Germany.
So, 今回のプレゼンテーションでは1990年代後半の最初の試験的な段階から現在に至るまでのヨーロッパ言語ポートフォリオの使用に関しての歩みを大まかにお話しいたします。主にドイツのハンブルグでの開発についてお話しいたします。
I will focus on changes in classroom management as well as testing. I will then discuss some of the critical factors in the use of the ELP, the European language portfolio, in today's foreign language teaching.
ELP が実施されることによって必要になる、テストのやり方や教室運営における変化に照準を当てながら、今日の外国教育においての ELP の使用において重要な要因について議論していきたいと思います。
As I'm not quite sure how well you are aware of the situation in Europe and why the ELP, the European language portfolio, was introduced, and why what we heard in the first presentation, multilingualism, plurilingualism, is an aim in Europe. I quickly sum up the situation so that you understand the background, why the portfolio is such a big deal in Europe. When the Language Policy Division of the European Community started a number of projects throughout Europe, piloting various designs of the ELP in 1997, so that's quite a long time ago, it was not envisioned that it would take so many years to reach the classroom level.
欧州評議会の言語政策部門がヨーロッパ中で ELP のさまざまなやり方を試験的に実施する多くのプロジェクトを1997年に開始したときに、教室レベルまで到達するのがこれほど多くの年月を要するとは想像されていませんでした。
The aim is European citizens should be able to speak two other European languages apart from the mother tongue. So this includes, for example, mother tongue could be Turkish, but two other foreign languages, European languages, should be spoken by the end of one's schooling or training in jobs.
ヨーロッパの人たちは母国語のほかにも2カ国語の外国語を話せるようになることが要望されています。
Promoting learner autonomy, intercultural awareness, and plurilingualism are the other three main objectives of the Common European Framework of Reference.
学習者の自立や異文化を意識すること、複言語主義を進めていくことが、セフ R の他の3つの目的となっています。
That's the language part. But in the initial phase, the socio-economic factors had a greater influence on the work of the language policy divisions than the questions of how to implement these changes in regular classrooms.
しかしながら最初の段階では社会経済的な要因の方が一般の教室でこれらの変化を実施するにはどのようにしたらいいかという点よりも言語政策部門の仕事に大きな影響を及ぼしていました。
As European countries knotted increasingly closer ties, it had become more and more important to prepare European citizens to move easily across the borders from one country to the other, communicating with each other, understanding each other's culture better. This task has been an ongoing project as the European Union is a growing community.
そう、ヨーロッパの国々はますます結びつきを強くしているために、ヨーロッパ市民が国境を越えて国から国へと簡単に行き来したりして、コミュニケーションを十分に取り、お互いに理解し合うことができるように準備していくことがますます重要になってきています。で、この仕事は EU が成長しているコミュニティであるために常に継続していく仕事とも言えます。
For German university students, it has recently become easier to spend a term or two at a university in one of the neighboring European countries than it is to move from one university to another within Europe. It is easy to enroll in inter-European exchange programs. They are not only offered at university level, but also for apprentices in various professions as well as for employees.
Okay. So ドイツの大学生たちにとって、1学期間か2学期間、ヨーロッパの近隣の国の他の大学に行って勉強することが最近簡単になってきました。ドイツ内の他の大学に行くより簡単かもしれません。ヨーロッパ内の交換留学プログラムに登録するのも簡単です。これらは大学レベルのみで行われているのではなく、さまざまな職業の実習生や会社員たちの間でも行われています。
Teachers of bilingual classes at my school in Hamburg frequently go to London for training workshops in economics, politics, or natural sciences.
私の学校のバイリンガルクラスの教師たちは、経済学や政治学や自然科学などの研修でしばしばロンドンに行っています。
Also for students, language certificates accredited by the COE are valid in any of the member states. This has led to an increase in learners of all ages to acquire certificates such as DELF Scolaire or DELE for French.
So, 欧州評議会で認定された言語証明書は、そのメンバーになっている国々ではどこでも有効になっています。で、このことによりあらゆる年代の学習者がデルフ、デレといったような証明書を取ることになっています。
For example, of our French learners at our school, 80% of the learners take DELF Scolaire and they take the first test, so A2. They don't do A1, A2 after 1 year for the fast learners, after 2 years for the bit slower learners. French is their second foreign language at our school. Now to the ELP. Initially, most of the ELP ideas were published for the portfolio to be used in secondary schools or adult learning. Since the first foreign language is now taught from year 3 in elementary school, various states have started publishing their research on the use of portfolios at this level.
So, はじめは ELP の考え方のほとんどは中等教育で使用されるためのポートフォリオで出版されたものでした。最初の第一外国語は今は小学校の3年生から教えられているため、さまざまな州でこのレベルのポートフォリオ使用についての調査が出版されています。
The last sentence I didn't say in English. The textbook publishers have now published a lot of additional material. So it's the textbook plus various for teachers no longer to be handled in classrooms materials, for tasks, for checklists, for additional ideas for tasks. So it's very difficult for teachers to keep up with what is published by textbook publishers. Most adult learner portfolios at university, for example, or in language courses for company employees are mostly web-based, so e-portfolios. The ELP, as you know, encompasses 3 divisions: the language past, the learner's language biography, and the dossier. In the regular classroom, we try to make use of all the 3 parts. But the learner pass, the language pass, in Germany, can only be handed out after 5 or 6 years of dealing with the portfolio. You don't receive the language pass right after 1 year of dealing with tasks for the language portfolio. The underlying idea is that the learner is an autonomous learner, can self-assess whatever he or she learns, and has a knowledge of language acquisition, so knows the steps and stages in language learning. This, as you can imagine, takes a very autonomous learner and a very language-aware learner.
非常に自立した学習者を育てるためにこれら3つのことをやっております。
In Germany, in 2003 and 2004, we received new national standards. And these national standards for all subjects were issued and focused on competence orientation and outcome orientation. For English, this was a big advantage because everything that the Common European Framework of Reference, as well as the ELP requires, was then part of the national standards.
2003年と2004年にすべての科目の新しい国家基準が発行されました。それらのすべては能力指向と結果指向に照準が当てられています。
Unfortunately, the national standard is not something like a curriculum. It's only the basis for a curriculum. As you know, we've got 17 states, and 17 states are very independent from each other, and every state then started making its own curriculum following the national standards. So we've got 17 different, almost different ideas of how English can be taught communicatively, outcome-oriented, and so on. The first drafts of state curricula were mere copies of the national standards.
最初の草案にあった外国語のカリキュラムはセフ R の A1 から C2 までの6つのレベルをただ単にコピーしたものに過ぎなかったのです。
So not very helpful for teachers at school level because they could have taken the Cefr instead of the national standards, instead of the state curriculum. It was all identical. Then the states following redrafting their first drafts realized that teachers at school level needed more help. And that's when the portfolio came into use in a much bigger importance. The portfolio version used in many, but not all schools, for example in Hamburg, was the first German portfolio to be accredited by the COE in 2001.
すべてではないですけれども、ハンブルグの多くの学校で使われているポートフォリオは欧州評議会によって2001年に認定された最初のドイツ語のポートフォリオでした。
Although the three parts, biography, dossier, and pass, serve as a common framework, there are a lot of differences in terms of checklists provided.
So, 言語学習記録、資料集、パスといった3つの部分は共通の枠組みとしては使用されていますけれども、そこで与えられているチェックリストの観点から見ると多くの違いがあります。
The first checklists, those for example published in Hamburg, were mere checklists done, not done, and the date. But this does not help the student in any way of knowing how well a task was mastered. So in the meantime, the other states following up the first portfolio idea have adapted and improved the checklists. The most important part, however, the teacher manuals were missing in the first part. The first scanty draft of a teacher manual in Hamburg was not at all helpful for teachers that foreign language teachers that had the idea of the old version, no? Grammar, vocabulary tests, reading, translating a bit, doing dialogues. The portfolio idea is a student-centered idea of learning and teaching. So the first manuals were not helpful and had to be added and improved. The most comprehensive manual is now that of Thuringia or that of Baden-Württemberg.
そうで、最初の教師用マニュアルは、非常に整備されて、おらず、教師たちは非常に使いづらいものとなっておりまして、今も常に改良が加えられています。
Another problem that came up about 4 or 5 years ago was moving the starting of English education down to elementary school. All of the German states now start regular English education in year 3 at elementary school. As we have a competition between the 17 states, now everybody moves further down to year 1. And half of the states now start formal English education in year 1.
そう今は小学校の3年生から英語が始まるようになってきています。で、1年生にまで降りていこうとする傾向もあります。
And this also meant that the portfolio had to change because you cannot use a secondary school portfolio with elementary school children.
ですからポートフォリオも改善される必要があります。で、最初のポートフォリオというのは大人用のセカンダリー中等教育用に向けて作られたポートフォリオでしたから、それを小学生用に変えることが必要となってきています。
And when you look at the primary school or elementary school portfolio, you will see a lot of colors. You will not see a lot of sentences with I can statements, I can do statements, but a lot of paintings and a lot of pictures to put check marks to it.
小学生用にはいろんな絵がついたり、チェックマークのところにも色がついたり、だいぶ子ども向けになってきています。
The language pass is the part that causes most headaches at the moment in many of the German states. The language pass is the one that is handed out after 5 or 6 years of formal foreign language education. The pass should contain self-assessment of the learner, and it should also have some kind of an assessment handed out by the teacher or the school. There's no set rule of how to pass out and hand out this language pass.
ほとんどのドイツの州で学校ではいつ言語パスを学生に配布したらいいかという、今疑問が出てきています。で、言語パスというのはもともと少なくとも5年間のポートフォリオを完了してから配布することになっていました。
Why 5 years? When the portfolio idea was introduced, Germany still had, all of Germany still had a three-partite school system. So we had basic schooling for 9 years with a first school leaving certificate, a second type of school with a middle school leaving certificate, 10 years, catering for other job possibilities, and the two schools that led up to Abitur, formerly called Gesamtschule, and Gymnasium, a school that leads to Abitur now in most countries after 12 years. And 5 years was the shortest term students would learn English, from year 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then the first school leaving certificate would also make it possible to hand out the language portfolio. It sounds complicated, but it is not really complicated in terms of the handing out as a certificate. The problem is on the side of the teachers, because teachers still, after so many years of working with the portfolio, still have a tendency of testing. So they do not really believe in self-assessment of the learner. I'm a head of department of didactics at my school, and I have spent this last year with many, many workshops to make teachers hand out the pass, because they said, well, I have not tested, and this person here does not know the grammar, and he does not know the vocabulary. I said, well, it's not the grammar, it's not the vocabulary, it's the level. The level that we hand out after, at our school, it's a gymnasium, after year 10, is all the students need to have B1+. That's for all the students. The bilingual students need to finish with B2. And it's, I cannot say easy, because they will tell me, oh, it's not easy, to find out from the can-do statements and also from a number and various types of testing that we do on a national level to find out whether the student has reached B1 or B2 level.
ランゲージパスはその5年生から5年生、6年生、7年生、8年生、9年生と9年の教育を受けて渡すことになっていますけれども、一番の問題は教師の方がそれをうまく使いこなさないというところで大変になってきています。
The language path is then at my type of school, a secondary school leading up to Abitur in 12 years, not only for the first foreign language. First foreign language at our school is English, as the students come with English from the elementary school period, and they pick up the second foreign language, which is either Latin, French, or Spanish in year 6. So after year 10, they have got a number of years of schooling in 2 foreign languages, and these 2 foreign languages are then assessed for the language pass. As Mr. Gaio told us in his talk, we have a lot of, you said, maternal languages. In Germany we say family languages because it could be the language of the mother or the language of the father. In Hamburg we have many schools where out of 34 students only 2 are German. We have up to 20 different cultures, 20 different language backgrounds in one classroom. So when it comes to what is the basic language, the most used language, it's difficult in some parts of Hamburg. And then somehow also English becomes the better starting point for many students because they don't have the disadvantage of not knowing enough German. And that's why lots of subjects are taught in English.
ハンブルグでは例えば34人のクラスでドイツ人の、生徒は2人しかいないといったようにいろいろな国から、学生たちが来ているのでその第二外国語の問題が出てきています。
But apart from the language skills, also methodological skills are necessary. How do I learn a language? How do I become aware of the differences between my mother tongue or my family language, the other foreign language I learn, and English? So not only English is part of or French is part of the English language portfolio, but also becoming aware of the differences of languages.
そう単に英語の言語能力ばかりでなくて、自分の、国の言語と英語と例えばドイツ語とそういったものがどういうふうに違っているのかと認識するそういう力も必要になってきています。
The learner's language biography that picks up where I just was with the family languages. In the portfolio, the first part of the portfolio is usually a little human being. And this human being needs to be filled with flags. The flags of the languages or the countries that the child speaks. And when a teacher looks at this little human being with maybe 4 different flags, then the teacher can already find out, this student is exposed to different languages at home, and maybe one language, many families in Hamburg go to Spain for holidays, so Spanish is a language they've been exposed to for some time before they start formal learning of Spanish. And the language biography is also important for those students that come from languages that have not that respect as English or French or the other big European languages. Students from the Czech Republic, students from Russia, students from Afghanistan, from Iran, they become very, very proud of their family languages. And they make use of that, and that's important to the language classroom. They compare without us telling them to compare numbers, to compare words they know, words that are used in German that come from their family language.
家族言語というものを非常に重要視していまして、で生徒たちもその自分の持っている家族言語、ファミリーの中で話されている言語を非常に誇りに思っています。
We encourage also studies abroad, little language courses or short language courses during the holidays. Everything of language experience is then put into the language biography.
その家族旅行をしたりして、そういういろんなところに行った時の記録もその言語学習記録というものに入れるようにしています。
A little explanation on this language attitude in terms of Hamburg. I mentioned that we have a lot of different foreign languages that are not formally taught in the Hamburg school system, but students that enter the Hamburg school system after year 7 have the possibility of replacing their marking in English or French or Spanish, depending on what type of school they are, with tests in their family language, which means the language attitude is kept up in the mother tongue or in the family language. If a student, for example, has not enough years of formal English education, coming, let's say, from the Czech Republic or from Russia, then up to the time where the student is up to formal testing in English, the student will take tests, an oral test and a written test, in the mother language, be it Twi from Africa or any of the funny languages I formerly or previously have never heard of. In May every year, 54 different languages at the moment are tested, so that these students can keep on with schooling in either English or, if required, in the second or third foreign language.
So, 学生たちはその家族言語で筆記や口頭試験を受けて、その成績を、英語での最終成績に置き換えることができると。つまり自分たちの持っている母国語を大事にして、それで力を測ってそれを英語に置き換えることをしています。
And it's also important, especially for those students that want to take the first school leaving certificate. If they do not have the required marking in English, they will not get a qualified school leaving certificate. But if they replace this English test with a good mark in their mother tongue, be it Twi or any of the many Russian dialects, then they will be granted a mark and replace their English mark, and they will get a qualified school leaving certificate. That's important, especially for Hamburg and other big cities, because we have, these PISA victims. Many of those PISA victims are students that have less ability in languages. So our idea was to have more time involved in German language learning, because that's what they need to be able to get a job, and replace English formal education by more German language education, because they already know more languages than one, and offer them then a qualified first leaving school certificate. The dossier, that's what usually everybody connects with the European language portfolio. That's those pages the students create, the text they write, the projects they do.
ドシエ、資料集ですね。そこには学生たちが作り出したものを、そのファイルのようなものに入れて取っておくことができます。
Increasingly, bilingual teaching has become an issue in many schools of Hamburg, and that's why also the tasks for the dossier are not only taken from English language classrooms or French or Spanish language classrooms, but from these domain-oriented ideas. Like history students will then write an essay or do a little documentary with their iPod on a specific phase they've been focusing and researching on in their history lessons. The advantage of that is that it's not only individual, single student work, but also possible to include new media. So they film, they tape, they create little documentaries with pictures, sounds, original quotes, and many of the students are quite internet-wise, so they use a lot of material in those dossiers.
iPhone とか iPod とかその他いろいろなもので個人的に学習したものをもドシエに入れることができます。
The ones that need lots and lots of additional training are the teachers.
教師にはそれに対して余分な負荷のトレーニングが必要となるかもしれません。
Working with the ELP is done in the cycle of collection, selection, reflection, and projection.
Okay. So, ELP のサイクルはこのようにコレクション、回収ですね、そして選定、制作、プロジェクション、計画ですか、そういったサイクルによって行われています。
In the beginning phase of the ELP, such a cycle will be just one individual lesson. Depending on the school, an individual lesson is 45 minutes or 90 minutes. And the student will then, in the phase of projection, already note about aims for the next cycle, aims for the next task.
で4段階のこのサイクルは最初のうちはとても短いものになることがいいと思います。で45分から90分の授業で、ですからこの4つの段階をステップを踏んでやっていくサイクルになります。
Tasks for such a cycle in elementary school are, for example, writing a little postcard. If now we look at year one, it's obviously not a lot of writing, so it's a lot of just pictures and individual words, single words going with the picture, and this steps up. So the collection later is something that students will also look back at. So I teach year 5 at the moment, or taught last year, and they brought their portfolio from elementary school. So when we did pets again, or shopping again. They'd all done that in their first big cycle in elementary school and now could add. And once they look back in year 10, they have a real nice documentation of their progress in learning English.
ですから1年生の時に回収したもの、そういったものを、例えば彼女の学生たちが5年生になって、それを振り返ってみると非常に進歩しているということが自分で、理解することができます。
As for the reflection, recently a lot of German states have changed the report card section of assessment. Instead of giving a formal report card with marks and a comment after the first term, we usually have now parent, child, or learner and teacher talks for 15 to 20 minutes. And that's done in half terms, roughly in October, November. And for this purpose, in English or later in the other foreign language classes, the portfolio is then taken into this parent-child-teacher talk, and the reflection and projection part are then the basis for the talk on the assessment.
今ハンブルグでは教師と親と学習者を含んで15分から20分ぐらいの話し合いトークですねすることになっています。でこれによっていろいろなことをリフレクションしてまたその次に向けてのプロジェクションもできるようになっています。
So I will drop some of the slides that give more precise information of the cycle because I think you are aware of the procedures of the cycle. In case you have further questions, we can do that later in the question time. Evaluating learners' performance is the critical part, and it's also a critical part in terms of the attitude I mentioned it earlier, the teacher has towards students and their abilities. Although we've been working with the Cefr for more than 9 years at my school, we still have teachers, and it's not related to age. It's not related to age. That still have the idea that English or foreign language classrooms should involve a lot of grammar, should involve a lot of just and context-based vocabulary learning. No, our textbooks still have pages and pages and pages of vocabulary, that's fine, but still a lot of focusing is just focus of learning and testing, but not involving the new vocabulary in the domains. That's why our school changed to bilingual classes to make sure that the language is, when changing to a portfolio taught or portfolio using foreign language class. That's why in most schools the basis for teaching is now a task-based approach, meaning we will no longer use the textbook page for page, but a set of a project or a topic, research topic, is the focus of the language classroom. Then we have additional parts where we coach those students that have difficulties in stepping up in grammar and in sentence pattern performance.
ですからそのタスクベースの授業になってきているので、以前のように教科書に沿ってやっていくわけではないので、教師はコーチとしての役割を持つようになってきています。
Still, it is demanding because our classrooms usually encompass 30 or 34 students. So for a teacher to look after individual progress of 30, 34 students is not an easy task. And that's why lots of teachers say teaching textbook based is a lot easier. I know exactly where my students are. I know exactly who knows which vocabulary. And I know exactly where students are in their grammar knowledge.
ですから30人から34人ぐらいの教室になってくると、教科書を使っていた授業の方がはるかに簡単で、一人一人の学生の進捗を教師の方が把握しているのは非常に大変です。
So it takes a lot of effort on the school administration to make sure that all the language teachers go this way. We have continuous workshops throughout the year to make sure that task-based learning, project or task-oriented learning is done in the classrooms. My colleagues and I, there are 5 of us, we visit the classrooms. We visit the teachers in their teaching. We only spend 10 to 20 minutes at most and can easily find out whether task-based, project-oriented teaching is going on or whether textbook-based teaching is going on.
タスクベースとラングエッジティーチングがうまくいっているかどうか教室に入って、チェックするというとおかしいですが見ています。
But in those classrooms where teachers actually did perform this step into a task-based and product and outcome-oriented teaching approach, students are better, performing better. In most of the German states, we have national testing in year 5, 7, or 6, and 8. And those classrooms, we can easily detect this because we get individual student results. We can easily find out that a student going on from 5 to 8 that is taught task-based, product-oriented, outcome-oriented is much better and is a lot more autonomous, is a student that is able to do a very, very reliable self-assessment.
5年生、6年生、7年生、8年生、そういった生徒たちの様子を見ていると非常に良い結果を出していまして、ナショナルテストでも成績がいい点が出ています。ですからこれはそのアウトカムオリエンティッドタスクベーストラーニングが非常に良い結果を出しているのではないかと思います。
Okay. I think that's all I want to tell you. If you have any questions, I'm open for questions.